That's right. Good evening. This is Boston University Financial Assistance talking real money. We're really glad to have you with us tonight. We have a little over 1,000 people signed in, so it's an exciting night for us. My name is David Janey. I'm here with my colleague, Liberty Collin.
Hello.
And what we're going to do tonight is try and help you answer the question, how does financial aid work at Boston University? Before we get started with that, though, I want to go over a few quick points. One is that Liberty and I will walk you through an overview of all things financial assistance at BU. First, we put that presentation together trying to anticipate your questions. You may have questions as we proceed through that, and feel free to type those in with the utility on the right of your screen. You will see a button there that says raise your hand. I call that to your attention only to ask you to ignore it. We're not going to use that function tonight because there are over 1,000 people and there are just too many people to use that utility. But you can rest assured, type in your questions. We will go through the presentation, and then at the end of the presentation, after our last slide, we will be responding to the questions that you have typed in, or at least to as many of them as we can get to. Any other housekeeping things? A few days, 2, 3, 4, 5 days after the presentation tonight, look for an email. You'll get an email that'll have a link to this presentation. I mention that because I know that lots of people like to take notes during a session like this, and please feel free to do that, but don't feel like you have to, jot down everything on every slide, because you will have a second bite at that apple when we send the link, and you can see these slides again. So take notes with that in mind, and you may want to scratch down things that are of individual importance to you, or just reminders for you. But let's go. So, when do you apply for financial assistance? This is the easiest question that we'll grapple with tonight. One-word answer: now. The essential forms that you apply with the CSS profile and the federal FAFSA form have been available since October 1. You can go online. Links to it are on our website, and complete those forms. There's really no reason to wait. Lots of times people think, oh, I should apply for financial assistance after I apply for admissions, or even after I get an admissions decision. Red flags, that is totally wrong. If you wait, you will likely be too late to be considered for aid, and we have deadlines that we'll call attention to. We'll talk more about profile and FAFSA, but our deadlines, unfortunately, are not flexible, so you really want to cue into those and be mindful of those. Again, we'll talk more about them as we get into the presentation. Talk a little bit about where you're at now, which is the college search process, nailing down what schools you're going to apply to. And there are 3 aspects of that students and parents and other family members may be taking into account to different degrees. There's the academic fit, there's the social fit, and the financial fit. And with all of them, but particularly the financial fit, it makes the college search and the college choice process a collaboration, at least to some extent, where various people are going to be involved, and there may be some collaboration, as I said, and also some compromise. But it's important to remain realistic, keep an open mind, certainly at this stage of the process, and keep the communication flowing between all the parties involved. A little more about financial feasibility and about value. We believe Boston University is an excellent investment, and one of the metrics that we use to keep tabs on that is the extent to which Boston University graduates are successful. And there are a lot of ways to measure successful, but certainly one of them is whether or not students who come and students who borrow student loans to pay for their education, or at least pay for it in part, are able to repay those loans. You can see from the numbers at the bottom of the screen in terms of default rates, Boston University's student loan default rate is substantially below the national average, which affirms for us that, yes, indeed, students often do have to borrow, but that when you graduate with a Boston University degree, you are able to repay those loans because it's been a positive experience and you're very employable and successful in your endeavors post-BU. So, how much will BU really cost? You'll note in this slide that the U is underlined because what we're trying to call your attention to is that the sticker price is the sticker price, and that's an easy thing to know. All you have to do is go on our website, look at any of our literature. You can see what tuition and fees are, what we estimate other expenses you'll encounter are. But at this stage, you certainly need to know that the most important piece of information is not how much it costs, but how much it's going to cost you. And you can only know that after you know how much financial aid you're going to receive. And so we encourage you to apply for financial aid, and then make an informed decision after you know what the actual cost to you is going to be. A few more metrics and a mention. We'll talk more about affordable BU later in the presentation, but what it means is that for first year entering students, this is our first year with affordable BU. We will meet 100% of your calculated financial need, and the BU scholarship aid will increase at the same rate of any tuition increase. And we'll talk about that as well in the future. Scholarship assurance, the Boston University Scholarship Assurance, means that for your first year, you'll complete the CSS profile and the FAFSA that I called to your attention earlier, but the first year is the only time that you need to complete the CSS profile. Annually after that, you need to complete the FAFSA because that's what's used to apply for federal and state financial aid. So, but we've simplified the process so that you're only doing the profile once, and in doing so, we try and make planning for what your cost factor will be in the years after the first year a little more predictable and easier for you to plan. And numbers, a substantial amount of money at Boston University goes to undergraduate financial aid. There's $260 million, so that is a huge plus as well. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to Liberty and step back a bit.
Okay. Sure. So you might be wondering, is there any way I can have a sense of how much of that money you have available would be available to me as a student at BU? The only way you can really know that is by applying for financial aid, but you can get a ballpark idea about what financial aid at BU might look like for you by using one of two calculators we have on our website. There's the My Intuition calculator, and as it says there in the graphic, it's a quick college cost estimator. It's very fast to complete. There's also the full net price calculator, which takes a little bit longer, has a little more in-depth look at your current financial situation, and can help us have a fuller picture of what financial aid you might qualify for based on your resources. But as I mentioned, the only way to know for sure what your financial aid award is going to be is applying. As David mentioned, both the CSS profile and the FAFSA, which I'm going to talk a little bit more about in a minute, are available to be completed now, but you want to do those concurrent with your admissions application. And of course, there'll be different deadlines that you need to meet depending on what type of admission decision you're looking for. So CSS profile and FAFSA. What does FAFSA stand for? You're going to hear that all the time. Rarely will you hear the entire name, which is the free application for federal student aid. We use the two applications because we want to both determine your eligibility for federal financial assistance and state financial assistance, as well as determining your eligibility for Boston University scholarship aid. The profile is used for scholarship aid here at BU, and then the FAFSA is used for federal and state aid. So the FAFSA, it is free, so we encourage you to make sure you are linking to the correct portion of the web, that you're doing the application for free through a government website. And in fact, you can actually link to both applications, both the FAFSA and the profile, from the BU financial aid webpage. And we encourage you to do that because actually we have some great tips to help you sort of prepare for that application process before you even get into it. And also by doing that, you know that you're getting to the right place to complete the application. The other thing that's great is when you fill out the profile in the FAFSA, you're indicating where you want that information to go. So you only fill out the application once and then it gets sent off to all the different schools that you're applying to. So in a process that can sometimes seem labor intensive, that's one thing that happens that will save you some time and energy. So as I mentioned, the FAFSA gets you eligibility for federal and state aid. We also do reconcile it with the information from the CSS profile to determine your BU eligibility. What are you entering there? You're going to be entering parents' information, parents' assets, students' information, or students' income, students' assets, parents, the size of the parent's household, and then the number of dependent children who are in college. And when you're doing that, you're completing it with the parent the student lives with primarily if parents are separated, divorced, or were never married. With the CSS profile, you're using all of the same information, maybe just in a little more detail, but it is important to know that we're also looking for information from the parent with whom the student does not live. So you'll often hear that referred to as the custodial and the non-custodial parent. So when you're going through the application process, the student will complete the initial CSS profile application with the parent that they live with. They'll then help initiate a process so that the parent they don't live with primarily can go in and start a separate profile application for their household. Quickly, just a quick snapshot of what I just mentioned. That first step, of course, with the CSS profile, when parents are separated, divorced, or don't live together, the custodial parent's household completes the application. That does include step parents information, and that's important to know that both for the FAFSA and the profile, when we're talking about completing income and asset information for a household where the student lives, that is going to be step parents information as well if the student's custodial parent is remarried. That application will be completed. Then the second step will be to input information about the non-custodial parent. They'll go in, create their own unique login, and file their profile. Many families will also ask us, what if I can't get information from the parent that I don't live with? For whatever reason, if that's the case, we understand that there are extenuating circumstances. So step number 3 could be step number 1. If you feel like you can't provide the information about the parent that you don't live with, we do have a waiver request that you would submit to the school, and we can look to see if that part of the application process can be waived for you and your family. So what are you going to need when you get these applications? The first thing you're going to need for the FAFSA is really important, and it really is step 1 before you sit down to fill in all the information, is applying for the FSA ID, or the Federal Student Aid ID. Essentially, it's a PIN number that you'll use so that you can return to the application if you can't complete it on the first go round, but most importantly, it is your electronic signature. So you won't be able to actually submit the FAFSA unless you have created a PIN number. There's going to need to be one for the student and one for a parent. If parents are in the same household, only one parent needs an FSA ID, but if parents are separated, it's going to be an FSA ID for the parent with whom the student lives. When you're completing the applications, it's going to be for I'm having a hard time saying this, the 2020-2021 academic year. We often just refer to it in shorthand as 2021. You will be completing the application with 2018 income information. So it's not going to be the income information for the year in which you start college. It's not going to be the one from the year before, but 2 years before that. So prior year application information. That's going to be true on both the FAFSA and the profile. So you'll want to make sure that you have the parents and the students' 2018 returns when you begin to fill out the forms, 2018 W-2s from all employers, information about your assets, where you can get from bank statements, investment statements. For the profile, you'll need information about a home if the parent owns a home. You'll need to know what the parent of record what the size of their household is, how many dependent children are in that household, and then how many of those are in college. And then the last thing is you'll need to provide Social Security numbers where available on the applications. So one of the things that actually, again, in a process that can sometimes, seem cumbersome, one of the things that you can do to make this process a little easier when completing the FAFSA is using something called the IRS data retrieval tool. And what it does is it allows the IRS to communicate directly with FAFSA and pull in your 2018 information. After you start the application, it'll ask you a few questions to determine whether or not you're eligible for that. And if you are, we'd really encourage you to do it, because that way it's faster, it's more accurate, and also it is a secure way to provide the information. Filling out the application in general is secure, but it is important to know that with using the data retrieval tool, when that information is pulled in, it will be masked to you. You won't be able to see it, much like if you're filling in a password online and all you see is dots rather than the actual letters and numbers that you're typing. That information will be pulled in, and the financial aid offices that are reviewing the FAFSA will be able to see it, but you will not, and that is strictly for security purposes. But we encourage you to do it because it will make, like we said, the application process easier, and then ultimately, if we need to verify any information, it's easier when we know it came directly from the IRS as well. So I've mentioned a Social Security number, and I know often people feel a little uncomfortable with providing a Social Security number that can be such a sensitive piece of information about yourself. So I want to assure you, first of all, that BU really takes the utmost security measures to make sure that if you provide a Social Security number to us, we are keeping that information secure. But the reason we ask for it is it's a truly special identifier for you as the student. So it's very important for the student. You'll need to provide that on both your admissions applications, whether that's the common application or the coalition application, and then on both the CSS profile and the FAFSA. It's required on the FAFSA. On the profile, it is optional, but don't consider it optional if you're applying to BU, because we use that Social Security number to link your admissions and financial aid applications. And if we don't have that, it may delay your application being completed on time. And as David mentioned, our application deadlines are not flexible. So we don't want your failure to provide a Social Security number to be the reason why we're not able to offer you financial aid, even if you ultimately end up qualifying. By the time your application is complete, maybe the money isn't going to be there. So it is important to provide that information. So we talked about deadlines, and so I just want to make sure we are very clear about what those deadlines are. Our largest application population for admission is regular decision, so I'm mentioning those first. I will mention the application deadlines for our other two populations as well, our other two September application populations. So regular decision. Admissions and financial aid applications, oh, surprise, they're the same. We already mentioned that. It's January 6th. You would be notified in late March, and if you completed your FAFSA and profile in conjunction with your admissions application, then you'll receive a financial aid award along with your admission decision. And then you'll have to make your enrollment deposit by May 1st if you decide BU is the right place for you. And you'll find that that is actually quite similar to many other private universities. So for early decision, I'm sure that there are a lot of you who are watching right now who are thinking early decision might be the right option for you. And in fact, the application deadline is right around the corner. It's next week. So November 1st for those applications, you'll be notified in mid-December, and then you'll need to make your admission decision or submit your enrollment deposit by January 1st. It is a binding admission. So it's important to make sure you have access to all the resources that you might be eligible for by making sure you complete your FAFSA and profile on time. And then we do have a second early decision population where the application and financial aid deadlines are the same as regular decision, but you would be notified students. It's another early decision 2 is another form of binding admission decision where you say, if you apply to BU and you're admitted, then you're definitely coming. You'll be notified in mid-February, and then you'll have to submit your enrollment deposit later that month. So again, another reason why it's important to maximize your chances of having a financial aid offer to help you make that decision. The one last thing I want to mention that wasn't on the slides here is that for students who are interested in being considered for Boston University Merit Scholarships, it's important that you submit your admissions application by December 1st to make sure you're in the pool for that application. So it's different than the regular decision admissions deadline, but you need to get it in a little bit early if you want to be considered for those merit scholarships. So I'm going to turn it back over to David so he can talk a little bit more about what aid can look like at BU and how we calculate eligibility after we've gone through the application review process.
Okay. Next slide. The cost of attendance. I alluded to it earlier, but this is a picture of what the current year cost of attendance looks like. You can see obviously that the largest components of that are tuition itself and the room and meal plan, dormitory and the meal plan. The other components, fees, estimates for books and supplies and so forth are also listed there, just so you get a sense of the full range of costs. Some of those costs are what we would call direct expenses. You're going to be billed from the university for those expenses. And others we call indirect or out-of-pocket expenses, like allowances for books and supplies, an estimate of what you spent on transportation and personal expenses and so forth. So they're sort of out of two different buckets, but we present this as an estimate of total costs, and some figures are hard numbers and others are indeed estimates or allowances. The display here, in addition to a really cute dog, shows you what we call the need analysis equation. So that figure that we were looking on the last slide, the total cost of attendance minus the expected family contribution. Now that's the figure that comes to us in the aid office from the profile in FAFSA. And the difference between those two figures is your calculated financial need. It's fairly straightforward. And as I mentioned, I think in the first or second slide, with affordable BU, the calculated financial need is the figure that we look at that we're going to fund for first year entering students. Types of financial aid. There are a host of different types of financial aid, and just kind of points of clarification. I'll go through how they are the same and how they differ. Scholarships, there are two types of scholarships basically. Those that are merit-based, that are you're going to be selected for based on academic strength or academic athletic abilities, artistic or other talent. And there are a number of them. The two most prestigious are the Trustees Scholarship and the Presidential Scholarship. And as Liberty mentioned a moment ago, if you want to be considered for those, you need to get your admissions application submitted by December 1st. Differing from the merit-based scholarships are what we've been spending most of our time this evening talking about are the need-based scholarships, where you complete the profile application and the FAFSA application, and eligibility is essentially based on the strength of the family's income and assets and the student's income and assets. In addition, there are student loans, which could also be a part of a package, and federal work study. It's not unusual for a student to receive assistance in their package from two or more of these types of financial aid. It's not just one or the other, but a package consisting of a combination of funding from these sources. Loans are listed, loans are included because it may not always be thought of as financial aid. Maybe you're thinking it's just gift aid, but it is a part of it. And so there's a modest amount of loan that's included in the package. Most frequently, work study is an opportunity for a student, usually on campus, to be placed in a job on campus and use earnings for usually out-of-pocket expenses. And it's a federal program, although funding comes from the federal government and from Boston University that matches that aid. What isn't mentioned on this slide in particular, private scholarships or outside scholarships sometimes, and you'll probably connect with those, particularly your first year in through your high school guidance office. and we mention them just so that you'll be sure and connect with those resources that may be available in the community for you to be sure and do whatever needs to be done to get those applications in place, because they account for a good sum of the resources that students in the aggregate use to pay for college. And this kind of endeavor is, you don't want to leave any money on the table. So it's some from here, some from there, very often, and it all goes into making up the package. Tips and reminders. I'm not going to read all of these for you, but and as I mentioned, you'll see this slide again when we send the link, but some highlights, things to remember. Complete the FAFSA profile. Don't wait.
You have to do FAFSA profile?
You have to do FAFSA profile.
Yeah.
Yes, you should not wait. And the MyBU portal is your friend. Be a frequent visitor. You'll use it for all sorts of things. Probably the first is the application status, where you'll find a checklist both for admissions and for financial aid. If there are materials that either the admissions office or the financial aid office is looking for to complete your application, they'll be listed there. You have the opportunity to upload certain materials that may be required, so you can use that tool to do that. Communication, I mentioned before, communicating parents, students, others that may be involved. Get organized, keep copies of materials that you send to the aid office. Communicate via the portal in terms of getting information, the website in terms of getting information. Questions, email the financial aid office or call. We're happy to help you and answer your questions along the way. So a few of the really important things to do. Don't hesitate to contact us directly if there are questions. We recognize that the process is a little complex sometimes, and so that is also exacerbated by the fact that everyone's situation is a little bit different. So one size doesn't always fit all. So if things that you're reading don't seem to make sense in your particular situation, don't hesitate to give us a call and help us help you through it. MyBU portal, the MyBU portal.
Yes.
We're in the portal. As I mentioned, is where you can upload documents, and ultimately, when it's time for a admissions and a financial aid decision to be rendered, you'll find that information in the MyBU portal. There'll also be other information about next steps that happen after you're admitted. See how optimistic I'm being here? It's going to be part of your applying to BU Life for some time. And we're at the questions part.
Great questions. So my friend Christina here has passed on some of the questions that you've been typing as we've been talking. So David and I are just going to split these up.
Okay.
And I'm going to go with the first one. So the first one is aid guaranteed for all 4 years? So the answer is, if you're awarded need-based scholarship aid in your first year as a result of applying with the FAFSA and the profile, as long as the student remains full-time and they're making satisfactory academic progress, so they're heading towards graduation, then yes, their aid through the BU Scholarship Assurance is guaranteed. There could be some changes if a student went part-time. Most of our students are going full-time throughout the year. So this is, as David mentioned, throughout their 4 years. As David mentioned, this is a great way to help you plan as you are making a decision about whether or not BU works for you and your family. That's part of the reason why we went the route of the scholarship assurance, because we want you to be able to decide not just if it works for the first year, but if it works for all 4 years that the student's going to be attending BU. The federal financial aid and state financial aid can vary from year to year. That's why you complete the FAFSA every year. For most families, that is quite stable because their financial information is similar from one year to the next.
Great. Do you give aid to international students? Unfortunately, need-based aid we're not able to offer to international students. But I'll remind you of the slide, a few slides back, where I was talking about different types of financial aid. A few of the merit scholarship awards international students are considered for, the presidential and the trustee scholarship. So those are opportunities, but there's certainly fewer opportunities for international students than there are for domestic students.
So this question actually went very nicely with my last one. Maybe I should have answered them together. Is the CSS profile required every year in addition to the FAFSA? And so just in case I wasn't clear about it, the profile and the potentially non-CUS profile are only required in the first year of application, and then the FAFSA is required for each additional 3 years. Most of our students are finishing their undergraduate degree within 4 years. So the profile, first year only, FAFSA, all 4 years.
The average debt of 4-year graduates, I'm straining a little bit to remember, but I want to say it's around 29,000. I may be a few hundred high or low, but it's in that general vicinity, which is around the national average. It's about where that is.
Okay, so this is actually an important question for our early decision pool of candidates. What do we do if we don't get enough money when we apply for ED, and is it still binding? So the first thing I would encourage you to do, if you are applying early decision, you're only getting one financial aid award because you're applying to Boston University and saying, if I get in, I'm going there. And so that does, you do not have that opportunity to compare financial aid awards. So I can see why you would have this question. The answer is that the admissions decision is still binding. However, if you have applied for financial aid and you feel like you can't make it work, I'd encourage you to contact the financial aid office and work with us. See if there are opportunities to make BU financially viable for you. If you ultimately decide it is not, you would have the opportunity to get out of the early decision, but I would really encourage you, to make sure that you have explored all your options before you go down that route. Also, the thing you can do is really use one of our calculators before you make your decision to apply ED, and you can get a ballpark of what your financial aid might be. If you put in information that's accurate about your family's current financial situation, you'll at least have an idea of what you might be looking at for a financial aid award. So if deciding financials are important, which they are for a lot of people, when you're applying ED, give that a shot first to give yourself a better sense of what the cost and the financial aid might be for you before you apply ED.
Well, it's funny, Liberty mentioned that there are probably a lot of people thinking about early decision, and judging from the questions, that's probably true. So I have 2 questions, both of which relate to early decision, and so I'll take 2 at the same time. Is early decision 2 also a binding contract? Easy answer, yes. Early decision and early decision 2 are binding contracts. So if you feel you need to, or you want to be able to compare financial aid awards from one of the schools you're considering to others, then ED probably isn't for you, because that is the nature of the process. Is the financial aid award different for early decision and regular decisions? No, they're essentially the same. What differentiates them really is that early decision is a binding contract, and you can't look at other aid awards because you're just looking at BU, whereas the regular decision, you'll likely get decisions late April, March, early April, and that May 1st enrollment deposit deadline is probably going to be about the same for most of the schools you're applying to. So that month of April is spent looking and comparing awards and making a final decision based on a variety of factors, but one of which may be what the education at different schools is going to cost you.
All right, so the next question is need met through grants or loans or both. So David mentioned that a little bit when he, yep, we already answered those.
We already answered those, okay.
When he was going over the types of financial aid, when we say that we're going to meet a student's calculated need, for most students, that is going to be through a combination of scholarships, loans, and federal work study. That can vary from student to student, but for most students, if we're going to be meeting your calculated financial aid eligibility, it is going to be primarily through scholarships, but then also through loans and work study as components of that award. And the next question that's sort of related is, if I don't apply for financial aid in my first year, can I apply in subsequent years? Absolutely, you can. you can apply in the future, and we will consider your aid applications. But if you do apply in future years, you're still going to have to go through the application process as if it was your first year incoming. So you'll have to complete the FAFSA and the profile and supply any follow-up documentation that we request. So I would encourage you, if you think financial aid is something that you're going to need, go ahead and apply the first year. Worst case scenario, you don't qualify, and then we can reevaluate if there was some sort of financial downturn, we can take a look at that in future years. And then I'm just going to follow up with one final question that's actually not related, but it is about the application process. And this questioner wanted to know, are other children attending private high school factored into the calculation? At Boston University, the pre-college education costs are actually not included in the calculation. We're not in the place to be able to use that to assess a student's eligibility for financial aid. That is something that is individual for each school. So there are universities that might take that into consideration. However, it isn't something that we factor into your eligibility for financial aid here at BU.
Okay, I have two questions that relate to the situation when a student's parents are divorced and there's a non-custodial contribution. The first is, do step parents have to report information if they aren't responsible for paying? The short answer is yes on the CSS profile. That's a common question, and I'm looking at the words "if they're not responsible for paying" in the question, which often comes from like a divorce decree that may specify who's responsible or who's responsible for what portion, which no doubt as part of the divorce decree is legally binding on students' parents, but it really has no particular impact on the financial aid process as far as our need to see income and asset information for both the parent and the step parent. So all of that information has to be reported on the profile. The other somewhat related question is, where do I access the non-custodial waiver request and how do I submit it? Now that's the form that Liberty mentioned earlier, that if you're unable to provide information for the non-custodial parent, if you're unable to get the non-custodial parent to complete their profile application, in certain circumstances we will look at that situation and may or may not waive that requirement. And the way you get us to look at your situation is by completing the waiver request form, the request that we waive that requirement. The form itself is a PDF document. It is on our website, so you can go to the forms section of the website and download that form and complete it, and then you can upload it through the MyBU portal. Why, thank you.
Yes. So we had a bunch of questions that were related to assets on the financial aid application. So I'm just going to shotgun through these and then we'll get back to David for this next group. So the first question is, should we include assets from 2018 or current assets? That's a really good question. So you are using 2018 income. The primary reason why we do this, and across the country it's used for both FAFSA and profile, is because that is something you've already done. You've already completed your application, and it's the most easily comparable, most accurate source of income information. However, for both the FAFSA and the profile, we're looking for a snapshot of what your assets are on the day you complete the application. So no, don't try to go back and recreate your 2018 assets. You're going to be reporting the information about what is in your bank accounts today. So then the next question is, retirement counted towards the EFC? The answer is no. There is a question about it on the profile. However, what you have saved in retirement, so in formal retirement programs like a 401k or 403b, an IRA, that is not included when assessing your eligibility for financial aid. And of course, I'm referring primarily to parents, not students' retirement savings. Although we do have some very forward-thinking students who are starting already. The next question is, how does BU use home equity? So we do calculate home equity from the profile. You are reporting the current market value of your home on the application, and then the current debt as well. And so the difference being the equity you currently have in your home. And that is something that we're using as a reflection of a family's overall financial strength. So it is considered in the application process for institutional scholarship. Need-based scholarship aid. And then you might be asking yourself, I have no idea how much my house is worth. How do I find that? So, many families have a sense from, when they apply when they bought their house, they have an idea of how much it's appreciated just based on, the way houses are selling in their neighborhood. But if it's been a long time since you bought your house, there are websites that can give you an idea of what your home is worth and what the general worth of homes in your neighborhood are. And so I would encourage you to just go ahead and look those up online. None is really better than the other, but what it really comes down to is, please just give us your best estimate. That's what we're looking for. It doesn't have to be a precise number or notarized number. We just want you to give us your best estimate of the current market value of your home. If you sold it tomorrow, what would it be? What could you sell it for? The last question is about businesses, because for both the FAFSA and the profile, though primarily on the profile, we do ask about your business value, the current market value of your business. And again, we're asking you for the components of how we get to that sort of equity that's in your business, as opposed to you doing the math yourself. So we're asking you, what is the current market value of the business? And then what debt do you have in the business? And that's what this is specifically about. So for businesses, you would report the debt you have on the business. The second sort of part of this question is, what about other debts? And there really isn't an opportunity to tell us about other consumer debts. It's not something we use to evaluate a student's eligibility for financial aid. But if there is something you think is unique, on the profile, you have the opportunity to tell us about any special circumstances you think might be impacting your family's ability to pay for college. And so you have a chance to sort of freeform, just tell us about things that you think are valuable for us to know on the profile. Unfortunately, there isn't that opportunity on the FAFSA, but since at BU you'll be submitting the profile as well, you will have that opportunity, and it gives us a great idea to create some context around your application. And I think, yeah, that covers all of the asset questions.
All right. Okay. This question is after my own heart. Is it okay to complete the FAFSA and profile before completing the admissions application? You may think I've already answered this, but this is a little more nuanced. You complete the FAFSA and profile now. They've been available for a while. And no, you don't have to wait until you've actually done the admissions application. If maybe you started it or haven't even started it, maybe you're stressing about the essay that has to be written, just be mindful of the admissions application deadline, but go ahead and file the FAFSA and the profile now. And you can get that done. It'll be in the system. Until the admissions application is filed, it may not be uploaded into our system, but once you do file the admissions application, like magic, they'll be drawn in and you'll be all set.
As long as you include your social security number.
As long as you include your social security number. Yes, indeed. Thank you very much. Can students see a regular decision before March? No, not really. There is a release date that happens usually toward the end of April, and they'll you'll get a notification that regular decisions are available for you to view, and then you'll be able to go on and look at them then. But before then, they're not available. What are merit scholarships? Merit scholarships, the small m, small s, are a type of financial aid that is differentiated from need-based scholarships. So scholarships are either merit-based or need-based, and by based we mean what you're qualifying for them is based on. And merit, typically it is academic strength, for athletics, for artistic talent in a school of fine arts, music, theater, visual arts. Those are the only merits?
I think so.
Yeah, okay. And those are based on merit. Need-based are based, again, on the FAFSA and the profile of your family's financial strength, income, and assets.
One thing I will add to that is that it's just important that just a small distinction that decisions on merit scholarships are made through the admissions process. So those decisions are made by our admissions directors, whereas the need-based financial aid decisions are made by the financial aid office. So they do happen independently of each other. However, if a student receives a merit scholarship, that will be taken into consideration that that student will have that resource if they're also applying for need-based aid. So a financial aid package could include both merit and need-based aid, as well as potentially student loans or federal work study.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Merit scholarships need to apply by December 1st, question mark. Yes, for the trustees and the presidential, you need to have your admissions application by that earlier date, the December 1st date.
And what's important about what David just said is it's the admissions application, not the financial aid application. So you don't need to submit a financial aid application to be considered for a merit scholarship. However, if you're concerned about meeting all of the costs of Boston University and you're thinking a merit scholarship will help you do that, then go ahead and apply for need-based financial aid as well. However, the application deadline for financial aid is not December 1st if you're applying for a merit scholarship. That is only the admissions application deadline. So this question is, and this is actually something that we have a number of students at BU who meet this. What if a student is a US citizen but is living abroad? It doesn't change anything having to do with the financial aid application process. They would just apply as if they were a student who was a US citizen living domestically in the United States. We do have students where the student may be a US citizen, but the parents are not. And that is absolutely all right as well. When completing the application, that parent may not have a social security number, that's okay. You can just fill in zeros for the social security number there. You shouldn't be filling in, don't make up a social security number to put it in there. If a parent doesn't have one, you just fill it in as zeros. I mentioned earlier about special circumstances. Yes, absolutely, we do take them into consideration. So your first opportunity to tell us about that is through the CSS profile in the special circumstances section of the application. One of the things that's nice there is it gives you the opportunity to sort of categorize them. There's been a change in, employment. We had an unusual expense related to some sort of natural disaster. Gives us you can sort of categorize that. And then if you feel like you really don't have the opportunity to give us all the details, or if something comes up after you've submitted the application, you can write to us via email, the financial aid email address, or send us a hard copy letter. We will consider anything you send to us before we make a financial aid decision. So any additional documentation you send will be reviewed before a financial aid decision is rendered. And then the last one I'm going to answer before I turn it back over to David is, can a student get financial aid when they go abroad? So we talked about how there's scholarship assurance. And yes, absolutely. If a student is going on a BU study abroad program, of which there are many, then they can take their Boston University scholarship aid with them on while they're abroad. If for some reason the very specific program the student wants is not available at BU and they decide to go abroad with another university, they would be able to use their federal and state aid to do that, but they wouldn't be able to take their BU scholarship aid with them.
A question or two? Okay. Let's see. How can I get help with the FAFSA and profile? There are lots of different ways. On the application itself, there is reference points where you can click in and get more specific information about each specific question that's being asked. So more often than not, that probably will answer your question. But if it doesn't, don't hesitate to pick up the phone and call us, or to email with that question. We're happy to walk you through it.
There are also some great videos, both definitely on the profile site, and there are also some that you can look for FAFSA as well, that sort of walks you through what the process is going to be before you get started, so you have a sense of what your, what the process will be like before you get into it yourself.
As I think Liberty mentioned earlier, on our website, where you have the links to the profile and the FAFSA forms, there's a long list of tips and advice about completing each of those applications that may anticipate some of the questions that you have as you're going through them. So that can be a resource as well. How much does the profile cost? There is a fee for doing the profile. As Liberty mentioned, the FAFSA is at no cost to the applicant, but there is a cost for doing the profile. It's $25 for the first school and $16 for each additional school after that. If you remember, when Liberty was explaining the profile, you fill the form out once, and then if you're applying to 6 or 7 or 8 different schools, then you list their numbers on the application, and that one document goes to each of the schools. So that's the way the pricing structure works on it. There are fee waivers that are available. Some of them are built into the form itself, and if you hit certain thresholds in terms of lower income or government assistance, then it will trigger the fee waiver automatically for you. So there's information about that on our website as well.
And keep in mind that if you were eligible for a waiver with any other College Board program, like the SAT or the, I can't remember.
ACT?
No, not the ACT. But if you're for any other College Board programs, if you qualified for a fee waiver, then you will likely qualify for a fee waiver for the profile as well. So don't let that be the reason why you don't apply for financial aid. Please go ahead and start the application process, because for our students who don't necessarily have a lot of resources, they're going to have the opportunity to apply for financial aid at no cost.
What if income increases next year? Will the award still be the same? That's what the BU Scholarship Assurance is all about. You complete the profile just the first year, and then your BU scholarship aid will never decrease from that point. So it's guaranteed at that level for 4 years. Your federal aid, you complete the FAFSA each year, because that could change up or down depending on income or assets, because it's federal money, and that's not something that we can control your eligibility around. But in most packages, the Boston University aid is the largest portion of it, and for that, the BU Scholarship Assurance guarantees that it will never be lower than the amount that was offered to you as an entering student.
All right. So the next question that I have, I'm going to give you those.
Okay.
So can I file the FAFSA? This is actually a great question, and something that I meant to mention during the presentation and neglected to. Can I file the FAFSA to get a student loan even if I know I'm not going to qualify for financial aid? Yes, absolutely. You can do that. And in fact, if a parent is thinking about using a Federal Plus loan, you would need to complete the FAFSA. The student would need to complete the FAFSA if they want to use a Federal Plus loan. So that would be a loan that the parent takes for the student. The next question is, if I am self-employed and my income fluctuates, will aid increase next year? That wouldn't increase automatically, but you do have the opportunity every year to let us know about things that may have changed in your eligibility, so that we can assess whether or not you might be eligible for more aid. Every student gets the same scholarship aid at the same amount every year without additional applications, but you may tell us about things that had changed. The last question that I will mention is, what portion of the aid award is debt? Because I know we did mention loans. Most students have the standard amount in their first year, which is $3,500, and that's the maximum any freshman can borrow through the Federal Direct Loan Program. There's an additional $2,000 in unsubsidized direct loans. That is a possibility as well. So the maximum amount in federal loans that would be packaged into your financial aid award would be the $5,500. But if a parent was choosing to borrow through that Plus loan program that I mentioned, it could be more. We don't package that into the financial aid. It's not part of meeting a student's eligibility for financial aid.
What if the non-custodial parent refused to complete the profile? That's a good question, and it's a complicated question, mostly because circumstances vary from family to family. As a rule, a parent's refusal to provide information in and of itself doesn't generally constitute a compelling waiver request, but we are interested in knowing the circumstances so that you can explain those. And that's really the function of that waiver request form, an opportunity for you to tell us about the individual circumstances so that we can weigh those and take those into account. But we know that situations can be complicated.
Yeah. So I just wanted to, because I know that this is probably a question a lot of families have. It's about early decision and financial aid. It says, if I should I apply ED if BU is my top choice, but I know my financial needs may not be met. You want to be careful about it, but you have the opportunity to use those tools we talked about with the calculators to really get a much better sense of whether or not your need will be met through the application process. So I would encourage you to do that. You do, through the ED process, lose the opportunity to compare financial aid awards, but I wouldn't say don't apply ED just because you're concerned about finances. Make sure you're educated about it before you make that decision.
And how accurate are the calculations? I'm guessing by this you mean the calculations on the estimators that Liberty talked to you about, the My Intuition and the net price calculator. They're as accurate as the information that you input to them, but they are an estimate. The only way you can know for sure is to actually apply. So we encourage you to do that. But we do recognize that people, particularly if it's their first time in the process, have no idea, and that can be a helpful tool in terms of giving you a sense as to certainly whether you should apply for aid or maybe how far over those thresholds you are. But the information is only as good as the information that you input. But again, if you're still confused after doing it and want to talk with someone about it, please feel free to be in touch with us, email or call us, and we're happy to have that conversation.
And with that, we're actually going to have to wrap everything up. So I know that there are probably a lot of questions that were typed in that we weren't able to answer. So I encourage you to reach out to us if you need it. Remember that this recording is going to be emailed to you, so you'll have access to everything we said if you didn't get down something you thought that was important. But you do have access to the office. And remember also that our website is a wealth of information. So if you find you have a question at 2 a.m., we're not going to be here to answer your question, but you can access a great amount of information on our website, and I encourage you to take a look at it. So thank you so much for joining us. We're really happy to involve you in this process, and I congratulate you on taking the first step and making sure you're educated and coming and spending some time with us this evening. David, do you have anything to add?
Good evening.
All right, thank you.